Welcome, everybody. This is Jeff Phillips with Accounting Fly. Happy Thursday morning if you're here live. If you're watching this on the recording, we're very glad you're here. Final session of 2016 Test Prep Forum, CPA Test Prep Forum. I'm logging in from Pensacola, Florida. Welcome to everybody who's here live, and we're so glad that you're here. We have a tremendous presenter and a tremendous session covering CPA ethics. You will not regret watching this session, I can assure you of that. Do me a favor, if you can use your GoToWebinar control panel, fire off in the question box just to let me know that you can hear me so we can do a quick sound check. I'd like to know that we're being heard and not talking into an empty microphone for the next hour. Okay. Thanks for all the responses, you guys. And we're glad you're here. All right. Why are we doing this? Well, as you know, passing the CPA exam is absolutely essential to your career. And frankly, guys, the faster you pass it, the benefits are endless. And that's why we're bringing master teachers like Tim Gearty to you so that you can get a leg up on the exam, but also sample some of the best teaching our industry has to offer. I think you'll find today that you will find some of the very finest teaching that the industry has to offer. Stick around to the end. While Tim's going to be talking about CPA ethics, Becker's been generous enough to give you guys some special offers. We want you to understand exactly about those, and we're going to give you an opportunity to connect with Tim online and on social media as well. So I'm going to briefly do a couple quick surveys. You guys, if you've been on this before, you know how it works. We want to find out exactly where you are in your career. This is going to help Tim give you the best information possible. So first question, you're going to see this launched right now, is where are you in your career? And sorry if you've already answered this, but it really helps us. Are you an undergraduate, graduate student? Are you working, but you have 0 to 2 years of experience, or 2+ years of experience, or none of the above? And we welcome, and if you are none of the above, buzz me, give me an answer over the question, because I'd like to know why you're here as well and what you hope to gain from this. So we'll give you about 10 more seconds to answer this. But Tim, just so you know, right now, 55% of the audience have 2+ years of experience. 15% are 0 to 2 years of experience, but they're working. So, and then 28% of the audience are students. 18% of those are undergraduates, 13% of those are graduates. So the numbers are fluctuating, but roughly speaking, just a little bit over half have 2+ years of experience, probably about to take the CPA exam. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll out and ask you the other question so we can get rolling on that. And that other question, everybody, is going to be, oh, and if you can see the results right there. All right. So thanks for that. And the other, when do you plan on taking the CPA exam? All right. So I'll give you about 30 seconds to answer that. So Tim, already off the bat, we're trending 85 to 88% are taking it within 12 months. So our audience is poised to get going on the CPA exam, and around 10% of the audience is 12 to 36 months, and about 5% is over 36 months. So I'll go ahead and show you those results too while we get going. Hopefully you can see that, but 83% are within the next 12 months. Thanks, everybody, for doing that. All right. So Tim, I'm going to bring you in, and Tim, it's really great to speak with you again. Everybody, chances are you've heard Tim speak, or you've heard Tim's name. Tim's a legend in test prep. He's the editor-in-chief and the national lead instructor for Becker Professional Education. Tim's also a partner in Gearty McIntyre LLP CPA, which is a firm that specializes in business advisory, litigation support, and forensic accounting. Tim, nationally recognized expert and speaker on a variety of accounting, tax, and tax topics, and has appeared as a keynote speaker for several Fortune 100 companies and many national associations. Tim, welcome. I'm going to let you spend a little more time introducing yourself for those of the audience who haven't had a chance to hear you speak yet. If you have any questions, everybody, fire them off in the question panel. We're going to leave a few minutes at the end to ask a few questions. And if we don't get them answered, we will get you answers over email, either from Accounting Fly or from Becker. So, Tim, I'm going to pass the floor to you and just offer you a very special and warm welcome this morning. Thank you for being here.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for having me here. And it's delightful to be part of the CPA exam test prep that's sponsored by Accounting Fly. And as Becker is being one of the sponsors, we're truly honored to be part of this program that you're offering to all these wonderful people. As Jeff said, my name's Tim Gearty. I'm the National Editor-in-Chief and one of the lead instructors on the national videos for the Becker CPA Review course. What we're going to do is we're going to take a look at CPA ethics in this particular session. Maddie, would you help me with the slides here again? In this particular session right here, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at our learning objectives. And the learning objectives are an emphasizing the need for, in this particular case, we're looking at emphasizing the need for prudent ethical judgment, especially when interpreting the rules. And this is a general ethics program. Now, we've got a nice little menu here, and we got a lot of stuff to cover. So we're going to move at a little bit quicker pace than we would in our review course, but we're going to try to also make this a little bit of fun. We're going to try to give you some insights into what this is about. Now, when it comes to ethics, what we're really talking about is preventing fraud. And there are three types of fraud. There's financial statement fraud, asset misappropriation, and corruption. Those are terms that are very sophisticated, but they really represent things that you learned in kindergarten. If you recall, in kindergarten, you learned that you shouldn't lie, you shouldn't steal, and you shouldn't cheat. Well, we've just put fancier names to them. Financial statement fraud is lying, asset misappropriation is stealing, and corruption is cheating. So we're really talking about, if you have ethics, you're not going to lie, you're not going to steal, and you're not going to cheat. Well, way back in the 70s, and yes, we're going back 40 plus years, a Dr. Cressy, all right, he came in before Dr. Phil did, and he came up with a study of all the companies that had experienced fraud, and he found they had three elements in their environment. He found that there was tremendous pressure, there was the perception that you could get away with something called opportunity, and that the individuals who committed the fraud could rationalize that it was all right. And what rationalization is a lack of ethics. It's a lack of integrity. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to patch that up and make sure that that doesn't happen to us or the organizations we're associated with. So why ethics? Well, it's the right thing to do. It's a condition of employment. Every publicly traded company has a code of conduct, and required by law, every employee has to go online, read it, check off a box that they'll apply it. And finally, there's also the stick in this case. If you get caught committing a crime, especially in the area of fraud, first of all, there's the perp walk. You're going to lose your job. You're going to have to pay fines. And yes, you could even go to jail. Well, when I first started in public accounting, and we're going back really far, I can remember the managing partner telling us, integrity. If you've got it, nothing else matters. But if you don't have it, nothing else matters. And I'll ask the following question. And again, I can feel your energy as you answer this one. How many of you have a friend or a colleague or a family member that if you ask them to do something and they give their word that they'll do it, you can take it to the bank. It'll get done. They have your back. Yeah, most of us have somebody like that, don't we? Well, how about the other side? Do any of you know someone who, no matter what they promise, you wouldn't trust them as far as you could throw them? Yeah, we have people like that too. Well, which area do you think most CPAs want to be included in? We want to be in the we have integrity area. Well, let me just do a little trip down memory lane. And let me just illustrate some of the individuals who lacked integrity. Some of you, if you recall, in the mid-'80s, when I first started in public, you remember Ivan Boesky and his insider trading. Maybe you also remember Charles Keating and some of the transactions he had with the S&L scandal. Mike Milken and the junk bond king and what he did, and he went to jail. And we have Nick. Now, Nick might be the first one that several of you go, no, I never heard of him, and I don't even remember a case study on him. Well, I'm going to use him as a great example of something. Who was our third president of the United States? A little hint by showing you the picture. Thomas Jefferson, right? Anybody recall what happened during his administration, the major acquisition he made? That's right, the Louisiana Purchase. Right, we bought the Midwest from the French. By the way, a little trivia question. We only paid $16 million for all that property. I'll bet you near some of your homes there are houses that cost more than that today. But back then that was a lot of money and we didn't have it. So we had to go to a British bank known as Barings Bank and borrow the money. So the United States government borrowed the money from Barings Bank so that we could buy the Midwest from the French. Well, this man brought that company down. Ultimately, it was sold for £1 British pound to ING. Well, now we'll get into some of the more common known ones. Anybody remember Ken Lay, Jeff Skilling, Andy Fastow from Enron? Yeah, they're infamous, aren't they? And then we also have Bernie Ebbers from WorldCom, right? He tried to sit there and create a better financial statement by lying. And then we have Dennis Kislowski. Yeah, Dennis is up there too. He was Deal-A-Day Dennis. Hey, by the way, I've got a quick question for you, and I'll apologize for being sophomoric. Take a look at that picture. Is it possible that that cop was originally one of the Village people? I'm just asking. All right, and then of course, we have our good friend, John Regas. He treated the company as his personal piggy bank and literally borrowed money and kept it off the balance sheet through special purpose entities. And by the way, I think he's posing. He's posing for a picture. Anybody remember Popeye? Anyway, by the way, here in New Jersey, and that's where I come from, in New Jersey, we take great pride in the historical corruption of our local government officials. And up until Bridgegate, we were pretty quiet on that front, until one of our former governors, John Corzine, stood up and took one for the team. That's right, he misplaced $1.6 billion and claims he has no idea where it went. You know how easy it is to misplace $1.6 billion. And then I've got a more personal story. I'm going to tell you about my former boss. Yes, my former boss is now in jail. His first name is Craig. I don't think there's any reason to go into last names here, but his name is Craig. And I worked for him for a number of years when I worked in public accounting. He eventually moved on to another one of the big accounting firms and ultimately embezzled almost $4 million from the firm. He was caught and he's now in jail. He had to surrender his CPA license. He had to surrender his law license. His family broke up and he's now divorced. And by the time he gets out of jail, he'll be 70 years old. Anybody want to be in the position of no family, no professional licenses, a fraud charge on your record, and not a penny to your name? Yeah, none of us want to be that. So again, the consequences of getting caught are tremendous. And yes, even Wall Street. Wall Street is known for some of their greed. Now, we've seen a lot of the presidential candidates waving their hands and saying, Wall Street is bad and we're going to do bad things to them. Wall Street generally is good, but there are some unethical managers there. And of course, we remember that from the collateralized mortgage obligations and the credit default swaps that were sold to innocent people who didn't understand them. And all this was done simply to make a dollar. I love this cover. This is from Business Week when it was owned by McGraw-Hill. Look at the actual title, Fuzzy Numbers, and listen to the indictment about accountants. Despite the reforms, corporate profits can be as distorted and confusing as ever. Here is how the game is played. And notice the picture. Isn't that a creative picture? You've got the magician's hat, but rather than a rabbit, it's profit being pulled out. And rather than the magician's wand, it's the accountant's pencil. Right? Accountants are responsible for so many estimates and judgments, and obviously some accountants, well, they bend the rules. Well, in this case, I'd like you also to look at Bernie Madoff. I think you remember him. And the guy over there to the right, that's Israel from the Bayou Fund. He ultimately tried to escape his jail term by driving his SUV up to Bear Mountain in New York, parking it on the bridge, and writing on the windshield, "Suicide is painless." He didn't jump off the bridge. He walked off the bridge, got in a girlfriend's car, and hid out in a trailer park. So let me ask a question. What do all these people have in common? Well, they were smart, financially well off at one point of their life, incredibly well popularized and popularized, but they all lacked ethics. And that's what we hopefully never have. Well, I love this one. I found this on Craigslist. Look at this particular ad. I need someone to take the CPA ethics test for me. Really? Is there anything lower than cheating on the ethics test? Well, let's go into ethical foundations. Here's an interesting question regarding ethics and hard work. Are young people lazy? Well, I imagine all of you on the line are saying, we work harder than anybody. And I agree. Sometimes older people seem to be concerned about the work ethic of the younger generation. It's nothing new. It's been going on for thousands of years. Each group of elders worries about the next generation, whether they'll be able to do the work and achieve it. I always like to share the story as follows. And that is, I always worry about my kids. My kids are in high school and college at this time. And I'll give you an example. I was coming home one night from work around 8 o'clock at night, and I announced my arrival. I'm home. I greeted the family. Well, was I getting a response like, hi, Dad? Love you, Dad. How was your day, Dad? Nah, not even close. You know what answer I got? Shh. Yeah, I was being shushed. My daughter was watching a television show and didn't want to miss one moment of the dialogue. You know what she was watching? That's right, she was watching Jersey Shore. I rolled my eyes as I walked by the room and figured I'd give her a thought. I said, gee, I'm glad to see you're watching something that expands your intellectual horizons. Well, she immediately responded back, Dad? I said, yes, sweetheart. She said, Dad, can you explain to me how Gilligan's Island expanded your intellectual horizons? She had a point, didn't she? We didn't have very bright shows back then either. In fact, one of my favorites was the Beverly Hillbillies. You'll note something here. No matter how dumb the shows are that we're watching when we're young, they didn't affect our work ethic. That was just mindless amusement that we enjoy. You know what? We've all turned out all right, and this generation's going to do outstanding things. Well, here's an interesting question that was asked. The fear and scare create pressure, which is one of the environmental issues that create a fraud. Remember, pressure, opportunity, rationalization. The thing that scared people the most was China. Really? How many of you went to bed last night worrying about China? Right. But you know what it is? It's what we understand the least that we fear the most. Maybe it's job security. Will we get the promotion? It's what we don't know. It's what we don't understand that scares us the most. Incidentally, I find this amusing, and I'll be careful how I phrase this. Look at the dark purple area. Men, it was determined, fear their wives at 5 times the level of women fearing their husbands. I happened to be at one of the big 4 accounting firms, and I mentioned this during my presentation there. And one of the partners, the female partner, said, and your point is? And I decided I'd back off and say, I don't have a point. Hey, how about this one? Did you get more done before emails? In the business world, it seems like they preoccupy all of our time. In fact, when I get off this particular presentation, I'll probably have another 30 or 40 emails in my inbox. We're always trying to work down and clean them out. Now, let me give you an example here, because this goes to the heart of pressure. How many of you here check your emails in the morning before you head out to work? When I ask that question of a live audience, it's usually 70, 80%. Then I ask a follow-up and say, how many of you check your emails when you get home after dinner just before you go to bed? And another 70 or 80% raise their hand. Then I follow that up with how many of you check your emails on the weekend when you're supposed to be bonding with your family? And once again, 70 or 80% raise their hand. Well, I've got a question for you. I've got a question for you watching this right now. How many of you watching this right now, in the brief time that we've shared together, have already checked your emails on your smartphone? And usually it's over 50% have to admit that, yeah, I happened to check my emails while you were making your presentation. And I'm not offended. I don't feel like you're slighting me. I understand that you need to do that. You're concerned for all of us. What's going on in China? Well, what this really proves is that we're all under pressure. It is a 24/7 work environment. No longer can people avoid the boss by simply not answering the phone on the weekends. Unfortunately, the boss has our cell phone number. They can text us, they can email us, and they may expect us to answer them during that time. Well, there's also a psychology of moral development that we have here. And again, moral development is built around social forces. There are sometimes things that are good in one generation are bad in another. I'll give you a business example. Anybody familiar with Jack Walsh over at General Electric? He was considered one of the best CEOs ever. And one of the things he was famous for was something called earnings management. He knew how to smooth out the earnings. If they were a little higher than expected, he bumped them down by creating cookie jars. He'd accrue for things that weren't really needed. And then later on, when income wasn't quite as good, he'd reverse them and put them back into income. That's income smoothing. It was considered brilliant at the time. In today's environment, that's considered a no-no. Right? Those are the kind of things that change the way we do things. I'll also give you a personal story on this. When I was in Little League way back in grammar school, I remember one year our team won the championship of our hometown. And I remember our coach said to the parents that he was going to take all of us in his giant station wagon up to the local ice cream parlor. And he was going to treat us to ice cream to celebrate our victory. Well, as we were going up Main Street on this Saturday in May, he started honking the horn to let everyone know that he had all the boys from the championship team. And of course, we rolled down the windows and we're hanging out of every window, flapping our caps and congratulating ourselves. When we got up to the ice cream parlor, the parents who followed us were all saying the same thing, that our coach was one of the best role models a boy could have. More boys would be lucky to have a dad like him. Well, I've got a question for you. In today's society, if a dad is found this Saturday to have 10 or 11 little boys in his SUV, and they're hanging out of every window as he's driving up the street honking his horn, how many nights in jail will he spend for endangering the welfare of youth? Yeah, we've gone from being a role model to not being so good. Another example, the underlying reason for change in ethics is the change in values that different society forces will place on us. To give you an idea of this one, I always like to use a personal example. When I was getting married, and this is 24 years ago, I can remember my wife and I, because of our religion, we had to go through some pre-marriage counseling. This was part of our religious requirement. And we were sitting with other engaged couples one Saturday morning, and the religious person was asking us questions. And he said, if you have children and they misbehave, will you ever consider spanking them? And he said, all right, break off into a private conversation with your engaged fiance, talk about it for a few minutes, and then we'll come back and discuss it as a group. I thought that this was an easy answer. Why? Because I used my frame of reference of my dad. My dad always believed with the boys, spare the rod, spoil the child. So we saw the hand of justice regularly. The girls, that was mom's duty. But the boys, we were disciplined very, very sternly. And I mentioned this to my wife. And she looked at me like I was a monster. She said, I can't believe a man of your intelligence would want to spank a child and show brutality and physical violence. Well, we were a little off on this, weren't we? Well, you know what? Over the next several months, we talked about it. We shared thoughts. She explained to me how her family had raised her brothers and sisters. And you know what? I got it. And now I'm so proud to say that we've raised boys and girls. As I mentioned, they're all in high school or college, and I have never once, ever raised a hand to any of them. And I'm proud. She helped mold a better version of parenting. Oh, by the way, my wife has spanked each of our children. All right, moving on. What are the considered principles of an underlying good professional? Well, it's we act responsible. We always serve the public interest first, and we never subordinate it for our own personal gain. Whether we're in corporate America or public accounting, we act with integrity. We also work with objectivity, regardless of public or private. The only thing that is exclusively associated with public accounting is being independent. We also exercise due care in the performance of all jobs, and the scope and nature of our service should never exceed our competency level. As a matter of fact, here's an interesting one. This article indicates that 35% of white-collar employees view pornographic materials. So we still have a long way to go in making sure that we're doing the right thing and we're respecting everyone. Well, an interesting question that comes up is the following. My other national instructor, his name is Peter Olinto, we're often asked to go out and speak at colleges. And we're asked to speak about, how to become an accountant and what it takes and what the advantages are. And there are so many, such as you double your income over your professional career if you get the CPA license. So people ask, well, what do you need to become a CPA? And we tell them it's the 3 E's. You have to have education, you got to pass the exam, and you have to have work experience. And to retain and renew your license, you also have to have ethics. So in this case, the role of ethics in society, well, businesses that act irresponsibly and with a disregard for society's view of what's right, they're going to speed the transition from ethical concepts to enforceable laws. And I'll give you an example. Is our government reactionary or is our government proactive? And I'll give you 2 examples. Sarbanes-Oxley, reactive. Dodd-Frank, reactive. Well, one of the things that we like to teach, and of course it's heavily tested on the CPA exam, is the idea of COSO's internal control framework. We call it a pyramid, and we also have a mnemonic that works very well in this area. But what we're going to say is we have our control environment, and that's the foundation of any good system of internal control. Then, once management and leadership establish a high ethical standard, then we charge the leadership, the managers, to go out and determine where are their risks. Where are their chances of lying, cheating, and stealing? That's the risk assessment. Once they identify where lying, cheating, and stealing could occur, then we establish controls. Controls that will either prevent the lying, cheating, and stealing, or they'll detect and correct it very quickly. And then once we have those controls in place, we monitor them. We monitor them to make sure they're always present and they're always functioning. And of course, information and communication goes up and down the pyramid. The one that we want to emphasize here in an ethics-related program is the control environment. It's all about setting the tone, that the leadership of the organization won't tolerate lying, cheating, stealing, and they want people to do what's right. It's all about the integrity, the ethical values. It's management's commitment to competency of people so that everyone knows what you're supposed to do, everybody's doing their job, and they would recognize if somebody wasn't doing the right thing. It's how active the board of directors and audit committee are in overseeing the company. It's management's philosophy, its operating style, and the organizational structure, and how we assign authority, responsibility, and accountability. So what are we considered to be able to do? Well, we audit, we do accounting, we prepare tax returns, we give business advice, right? Those are the most common sources of our professionalism. Obviously, we act independent of our client when we're in public accounting. Whether we're in public or private, we have an obligation to act with integrity and objectivity, and we comply with all standards. We keep information confidential, whether we're in corporate America and we don't talk about what's going on, and or we're in public accounting and we don't talk about the client's information. Obviously, if independence is required, we don't accept commissions or contingency fees, and we never do acts that are discreditable. Well, I've got an interesting statistic here. AICPA commissioned a Gallup poll recently to find out what people thought of CPAs. And look at how positive the impression of a CPA was. Decision makers gave us a 97% positive rating. Executives, 95. Investors, 89. Is there any candidate running for president that wouldn't die to have those percentages? And of course, there are pressures. There's the bottom line pressure. We've got to meet the deadline. We've got to be able to get the job done and get a good answer. There's competition, both outside and inside the company. And of course, so much is about, what did you do for me recently? I don't care what you did a year ago. I don't care what you're planning on doing 5 years from now. It's, what are you doing right now for me? So I have a dear friend who's been the chief accounting officer at both the AT&T and at General Motors. And when he makes speeches on ethics, he says the following. If what you're doing right now gets reported tomorrow morning on the front page of the Wall Street Journal with your name, are you okay with that? And if not, why are you doing it? He also has a second very powerful statement that I'd like to share with you. He says, I want to remind all of you here that you can always get another job. You can't get another reputation. And think about all those villains that we showed you at the front end of this presentation. Every one of those villains, when they die, there'll be a news report that says, today, at the age of 87, so-and-so died. They're best remembered for their fraud on ... No matter how much good they do the rest of their lives, they'll always be marked for what they did wrong. Well, there's also some great statistics to look at. And one of those is that when people were asked, does your leadership exhibit ethics and integrity? And they said yes, it was found that they had 93% job satisfaction. But when they said no, the leadership does not exhibit ethics and integrity, then all of a sudden job satisfaction went way down to 31%. Well, many of you listening in are only in the beginning of your career. So you're saying, well, that's not me, so I don't have any impact there. But guess what? As a young professional, you'll have subordinates. In a year or so from now, you'll have new entry-level people graduating from college who will be literally working for you. You also have secretaries and clerks that are currently literally your staff. So they asked them, do you exhibit ethics and integrity? And when your subordinates said that you, yes, exhibit ethics and integrity, their job satisfaction was at 91%. But when they said, no, you're a sloucher, you don't exhibit ethics and integrity, it dropped down to 41%. Clear line of job satisfaction. And of course, that results in better job performance. Well, look at your marketing. When ultimately companies have a reputation of being ethical and honest, customer satisfaction is quadrupled. And being able to attract and retain the newest and best also is quadrupled when you have a reputation that's positive. Well, let's go back and take a look at what just some of the items that we've spoken about. Here we said pressure, opportunity, and rationalization create the environment for fraud. And of course, there's time pressures, job pressures, client pressures, and yes, even personal pressures. Any of you ever been working late and got a call from your significant other saying, where are you? Right? Yeah, and they're not wrong. You did promise to stop by or go over to their place, and now you're working late trying to get the job done and impress your boss. Again, there has to be a balance. Well, with that, I'd like to point out that the AICPA has rearranged the entire code of professional conduct. And this is something you need to know for the CPA exam. So we show you where you can go on to the website to look at it. One of the things the AIC recognized was that they can't give you every answer to every ethical dilemma. So what they've done is they've also created what they call a threats and safeguards approach. Now, green means you can do the service. Red means stop, don't do the service. What you have to do if you don't have a specific answer to a specific problem and dilemma, you ask yourself, do I see this as a threat? If the answer is no, go ahead and do the job, green light. But if the answer is yes, ask yourself the following. Is this a significant threat? If the answer is no, go ahead, green light, do the job. But if the answer is yes, it is a significant threat, go over to number 3. Are there existing or new standards that will help safeguard this problem? In other words, either eliminate it or reduce it to an acceptable level. And if the answer is yes, you can go ahead, green light, do the job. If the answer is no, don't do the job. Because one, you had a threat that was significant and there are no safeguards to make it less damaging. So what are the types of threats that we have? Well, there are 7 types. Let me just mention them because of our time constraints. There's the adverse interest threat, where your interest and that of a client or your boss are at odds. There's the advocacy threat, where you've been so involved in promoting what the interest is of your boss or a client that you've lost your objectivity. There's the familiarity threat. You've been there too long. You now sympathize with anything the person or the boss or the client wants. There's the management participation. You're actually working and doing management functions, which means you can't be independent. There's the self-interest threat, which says that you have personal skin in the game on this one, so it's hard for you to be objective. There's you're reviewing your own work threat, called the self-review threat as well. And finally, we have the undue influence. That's where your boss or the client says either do the job or we've got a serious problem with you. Okay? So we look at those safeguards as part of the process right here. So there are safeguards, and obviously either the client could have implemented them, our profession could have implemented them, or maybe our company has implemented them. An example, maybe there's one dealing with gifts where they say, okay, gifts of under $25 are acceptable, over 25 aren't. So the effectiveness of safeguards depends on factors. Factors such as facts and circumstances. Did you identify the right threat? Were there safeguards? Who are the parties involved? How do you apply the safeguards? Are they consistently applied? Who applied them? How do they interact? And whether the attest client is a publicly traded company. Well, this next slide is something that we at Becker have created. The new Code of Professional Conduct is completely different than what many of you saw when you were in school. The old days, it was just numbered 101 through all the way down through the 900s. That's gone. Now we have 3 parts. Part 1 is for people in public practice and their Code of Professional Conduct. You'll notice there's the number 1 with a point in front of each one of the areas. If, however, you're in private industry, then you go to Part 2 and you apply those rules. And you'll observe that they have a 2 point and the number. And if you're not working, so you're unemployed and you're looking for a job or you're retired, then you follow Part 3. Now, a couple of interesting points. Notice integrity and objectivity. Whenever you're working, you're going to have to follow one of those. Independence is only applicable if you're in public accounting. It's not applicable if you're in business or you're unemployed. Competency applies whenever you're working. Advertising, holding yourself out, that's applying all over the place. Why? Because of the fact that when you're advertising, such as a resume, it has to be realistic. Confidentiality of information, whether your current employer you're talking about or a previous employer, you're always expected to keep that information confidential. The firm and what your name is and how you're organized only apply if you're in public accounting. And then acts discreditable apply to everybody. Now, this is a menu that we've created to make it easy for individuals to find the areas. In the actual professional code of conduct, it just strings these down in numeric order. We've broken them out to make this easier for you to digest it. Because of our time constraints, I'm just going to mention a couple of small things. Like 1, never make an ethical judgment alone. If you're not sure, talk it out, think it out with somebody else. So taking a look at this item, I want to just mention one area with some degree of familiarity. When it comes to independence, there are 3 categories that you need to know on the CPA exam. 1 is called covered member. That's anyone who's involved in the audit, anyone who did anything for that client and spent at least 10 hours, and anybody back at the office who could influence the engagement. They have to be 100% squeaky clean. No direct or indirect interest in the client. Immediate family members, those are people who live under your roof. Those people have to be virtually also squeaky clean with no direct or material indirect interest. And finally, you have close relatives. Now, that's a very broad category. And when I'm teaching candidates, I always say, that's everybody you have to invite to the wedding. Notice I said have to invite. You have to invite your parents. You have to invite their parents. You got to invite your brothers and sisters and their brothers and sisters. And if you're going on a second marriage, maybe your adult kids and their adult kids. Remember, if the kids are still living with you, they're immediate family. But if they've grown up and moved out, then they're close relatives. With them, it's all about knowledge. If you knew, or you should have known, that they ultimately had a job at that company that gave them access to the accounting records, or had the ability to influence management, or that they held 5% or more of the stock. Either one of those. If you knew or should have known either one of those, then they can impair you. I want to give you just one example of how strict this rule is. I have a dear friend. This individual is a national partner working in New York for PricewaterhouseCoopers. A couple of years ago, he and his wife had another child, and a friendly neighbor gave them a thoughtful gift. 1 share of Walt Disney stock, put in a frame, and literally to hang in the baby's room. What a wonderful gift. You know, the stock kind of represents business, and he's in the business world. And then obviously all those wonderful pictures of the Disney characters. He thanked the friendly neighbor for this thoughtful gift, but said he couldn't accept it. Why couldn't he accept it? Well, guess who audits Walt Disney out in California? That's right, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and he's a national partner. So in theory, he could influence the engagement. Anybody here think that one share of Walt Disney stock given to a partner in New York is going to motivate him to fly out to California and check out all the audit steps? No way in jeepers, right? But there's a strict rule that says you can't have any direct ownership. Integrity and objectivity is another one. Now, with integrity and objectivity, what we're saying is you as a professional, you have to maintain objectivity and integrity and be free of conflicts of interest and shall not knowingly misrepresent facts or subordinate your judgment to others. That applies whether you're in public or in private. By the way, notice this particular version of it is in the public accounting. And how do I know this one's in the public accounting? Because I see 1.100. Right? The application of it is for members in public practice and their ethical concepts. If you take a look, conflict of interest for members, when faced with a conflict of interest, look to this actual code of professional conduct to see if they address it specifically. If not, use the threats and safeguards approach. So in this case, threats can be given by many, many different examples, and we have many of them, but because of our time constraints, I'm going to move past those items. But I will mention that when it comes to gifts and entertainment, this is one where gifts and entertainment must be of a reasonable nature. Example, if I want to invite the audit partner to come to a football game, say an NFL game, because we have season tickets, is that going to impair independence? Probably not. But how about if I invite that partner to every home game, all 8? Now you're starting to get a little bit ridiculous. So obviously that would probably be unacceptable. Well, where is the line? You've got to make that decision. There's a professional judgment, and the threats and safeguards would be used to do that. Also, preparing financials. You should never subordinate your judgment to others doing the work. And if you feel that somebody above you is trying to pressure you to create a financial that's false or deceptive or misleading, you have several options. You can bubble it up to somebody higher up. You can bring it into the anonymous whistleblower statute. You can directly go to the audit committee, or you can seek legal advice. And that's also dealing with your subordination of judgment. Well, we only have a few moments left, and I do want to take just a moment or two to tell you a little bit about Becker's CPA review course. So just for a moment, allow me to mention a little bit about the dynamics of our program. We've had hundreds of thousands of candidates take our course. We are all with the top 100 firms. We also have been around, and over 90% of all the national award winners since 2005 have taken our course. We have current content. We also provide the most relevant questions. Candidates who come out of the actual exam say, my gosh, I saw questions that looked almost like clones of what you guys had me prepare. We have an integrated learning system, and our materials really do mirror the CPA exam. We have a wonderful staff working on this. If you're interested in looking into our program, we have an online program for those of you who are active, so you can do the studying when you feel like it at your pace, and you can do it in little snippets or big giant chunks, whichever way you find is the most effective. We also offer live classrooms. We have FastPass for those of people who are looking just to get one quick snap before they go in, and we have intensive reviews. With respect to efforts, we also have the ability, and I know people love the idea, that they can actually go on their phone and they can actually work problems right there. We are so adaptive with all the new technology that we have. So we have packages that are there. We have 100 hours of expert instruction. We have over 7,200 questions that you have. We have task-based simulations and final exams that you can practice with. So if you're interested, you can look into our course. We say look at all the other competitors, and you'll understand why the top 100 accounting firms, including all of the Big Four, have selected us as the program of choice for their professionals. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff, because I know Jeff wants to leave a couple of minutes for us to chat a little bit about any questions you may have. So Jeff, if you're still on the line, I'm turning it back over to you.
Tim, I'm here. One comment before I do. You know, one way you've changed my thinking about ethics goes back to the start of the presentation, where we think about ethics as being something that you don't want to do, that bad behaviors you don't want to avoid, or that you want to avoid, excuse me. But part of ethics too is, and the question you have to ask yourself is, are you an accountable person who's the type of person that will do the things that you say you're going to do? And I know in business, and I'm sure anyone listening who works or is in class groups understands that that is a very high ethical standard, and it's one you should expect of yourself, right? Is to be the type of person who does exactly what they say they're going to do. And it's refreshing to hear you say that. So I just want to add that one comment before I ask questions.
Oh, well, thank you. And I think that is so important. You know, when people promise things, I imagine our audience can also relate to you've asked somebody to do something and they don't do it, and you email them, text them, you call them, and they don't respond to you, and they avoid you for a day or so because they know they failed to do what they said they were going to do. And then they pretend nothing happened and they act as though the relationship should go forward. But aren't you a little annoyed that they didn't do that job and that you wound up getting stuck with it, or you wound up looking bad because you had assigned it to them? So if you do the job and you're the go-to person, your career is going to take off.
I also think about, you mentioned the case study of different people who really failed in their own personal ethics in their career. And isn't it true that I think a lot of people who wind up there, like the boss that you had that you mentioned, or even people like Jeff Skilling that we attribute to being, you know, people of low ethical character, they don't start out that way, right? And the importance is to start your career and commit to this every single day, because you don't want to go down a trap door. And I think that people with very good intentions end up going down that trap. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. It starts as one little item that you decide, well, I can weasel this one item one time once. And then all of a sudden it's, well, you know, I got away with
just
that.
For 1 second. Do we have you now?
Yep, you have me.
Okay, sorry. I didn't hear the answer. I didn't hear your response. Sorry.
Oh, my response was absolutely. It's a slippery slope.
It is. It is indeed. So everybody, before we wrap up, I want to point out a couple of things. We have sent you a link that includes special pricing on Becker. It's a link that you can check out and even look at if your university is included on a list that offers specific discounts. So please check that out. Tim, before we ask a couple questions, how can we keep in touch with you? I've had a few questions like, can we connect with Tim online? Can we connect with Becker online?
And the answer is yes. We have Facebook pages that you're more than welcome to join. Becker has their own separate one, which of course we work through there. And then of course, the two national instructors, Peter Olinto and myself, also have Facebook sites that we interact with the students. Not to answer technical questions, but to give them advice and to motivate them to pass the CPA exam.
Fantastic. And Tim, just so you know, you may not see this, but we have sent links to your Facebook page as well as Becker's Facebook page too. And the question, the primary question that I've got to summarize a few questions, Tim, is a lot of people are sort of looking for that one piece of advice that a teacher like you might want to give to an audience. If somebody said, Tim, what's the one thing you'd want to tell me that I need to know about the CPA exam and how to pass it? What would be that one best piece of advice?
Yeah, there's so many, but if I had only one bit of advice I have to give, have confidence in yourself. There is not an individual that I've met that can't pass the exam if they're willing to make the commitment. In fact, at one point, way back when, I was a college professor, and I had some great straight A's who walked into the prep courses and felt, I don't need this, I'm already smart, I'll probably be able to figure it out on my own, and they weren't successful. And then I had candidates who came in who were struggling C students in college, and they were a little bit terrified and felt they didn't have the opportunity to pass the way others did because of their backgrounds or maybe their intelligence. And I told them, no, you put in the work, you commit the time, you will pass. And I have never once ever had to back off that promise.
Right.
If you put in the time, you will pass the CPA exam. It's an exam that can be passed, and in fact, they actually show statistics at the AICPA that say individuals who continuously pursue it and don't give up if they fail one part of the exam and say, well, it's not for me, they have a huge success rate. And of course, at Becker, we're very proud of our success rate. We try to make the program and the lectures enjoyable, or as fun as they can be. Peter Olinto is one of the funniest and most dynamic instructors you'd ever want to meet. I'm in awe of how great a teacher he is. And I try to follow up with some of my own sense of humor and also try to motivate students so that candidates say, I really actually almost enjoyed class. And with that, they can actually come back and study and pass.
It's absolutely agreed. Tim, a lot of changes are coming down the pike for the CPA exam. Some of them are already in place. How does Becker accommodate for these changes in the exam?
Sure, good question there. The CPA exam is going to change in early 2017. And the way it's going to change is, first of all, there's going to be more of a shift towards task-based simulations. So instead of it being 60 points in multiple choice and 40 in task-based, it's really going to become 50-50 in most of the areas. I'm generalizing here. And in addition, there's going to be much more evaluation and decision-making associated with it, specifically in auditing. There's going to be a lot more challenge where it's not just what are the steps that you audit in receivables or auditing steps in inventory. It's going to be, all right, here are some papers and tell us which documents are important, which ones aren't. And then when you review these documents, what is it telling you? Whether their statements are correct or whether there's an error or whether there's potential fraud. So there's going to be more understanding and decision and evaluation, which is going to be a challenge for some students. But we're already preparing for this. We've been to the AICPA several times over the last couple of years. We've been getting insights into how they're going to ask the questions, and we're building the study banks intentionally to draw out those new skills that the world says they have to know and the CPA exam is going to be testing on. So you want to be aware that if you pass parts now, it will count. It's not like they're going to drop if you don't pass them before the new methodologies are in place. It's just the parts you haven't passed will now test you in a new manner. Oops, did I lose you, Jeff?
Tim, no, I was firing away with my next question while on mute, so thanks for telling me.
Okay.
Tim, does Becker offer students the ability to review one or just two sections of the CPA exam instead of all four parts at once?
Absolutely. In fact, we recommend that you don't sit for all four literally simultaneously. We believe in a divide and conquer approach. So what we'll tell you is it's always best to study them in a particular order as well. And part of that study in the particular order would be the following. There are four parts, right? There's financial, which is basically all your debits and credits. There's regulation, which is 2/3 tax and 1/3 law. There's audit, and then there's business environment. Now, if you look at those, they spell BARF, B-A-R-F, business environment, audit, review, and financial. A lot of people feel that way when they're literally looking at all this material they have to learn.
Yeah.
But we say, flip it around, and that's the way you should study. Go for financial first, then go for regulation second, then go for auditing third, and complete your studying with BEC. And we have some very reasonable logic for doing that. When you get to auditing, as of right now, they will only test you on auditing topics, but there's an expectation that you understand some fundamentals in financials. So I'll give you an example. And candidates are terrified when they see this question until they realize what they're asking. It says, you're the senior, and you've been assigned to audit derivative and hedge activity at the client. What are the major audit risks that you have to encounter? And they go, oh my God, I don't remember derivative and hedging. Well, if you took financial first, we taught that to you. But in auditing, all you need to know is that hedge accounting uses fair values. Everything is marked to fair value every period. You mark a hedge up or you mark a hedge down, depending on if it's protecting you or it's harming you. And therefore, fair value is the greatest risk. How is the company assessing fair value? How are they reporting fair value on the balance sheet? And how are they reporting fair value on the income statement? So if you understand just the fundamentals of one area, it helps you in answering questions in the other areas. So financial first, then some of those topics will help you in improving, especially in the area of tax, but also in law. And then all three of those will help you in answering some of the audit questions. And then BEC kind of stands out on its own. So that's the methodology that has typically been recommended by our instructors and our program overall.
Tim, that's fantastic. Thank you for the introduction to Becker, and thank you so much for the wonderful information about ethics. I mean, obviously, it helps for the career, helps for the exam, but it helps in life in general, and it's super critical information. We'll quickly wrap up since we are here at the bottom of the hour, and let's see here. A couple of you guys now have the link to the special pricing for Becker. I encourage you to click on that link before we end the webinar, because that way it'll open up a new window. Please connect with Tim and Peter Alento through the Facebook page. And if you're looking for the links that we've sent, they have come to you through the chat or the question panel. You should see them in your GoToWebinar. If you don't see them, we'll be emailing you after the presentation with that as well. So go ahead and click those links if you have them right now. You can also download the slides as a handout through the GoToWebinar panel. And lastly, we're going to be asking you some survey questions as you walk out. We'd love to get your feedback on the presentations and what you thought about the event. Tim, I know you got to run. You've got a big presentation, and it sounds like it was in New York and New Jersey. So I'm going to give you the last word here, and then I will close up shop here. But Tim, we're grateful for you, and we're really glad that you're here today. Thank you so much for giving us your wisdom and expertise.
Jeff, thank you so much. I certainly do appreciate our working with Accounting Fly. And
guys, thanks so much for being here. And thank you so much for participating in the Test Prep Forum. If you are looking at Masters of Accounting programs, you need to wrap up those hours before you take the CPA. Take a look at our Masters Finder. I think we're going to send a link out for that as well. And if not, we'll get it to you through the email. We appreciate your feedback and your comments. And that's it for now, everybody. Thanks for being here, and we will talk soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.